Hi, everyone. This is Katie Ardeline from Oculus Insights on the call right now. I'm going to be your panelist or your webinar master for today. So you might see a picture of Mike Pownell, but I don't look like a middle-aged man. Not that there's anything wrong with being a middle-aged man, but that's not me. So just a couple of things as you guys are logging on. If you wouldn't mind just opening up the chat feature, which is, if you can't see it across the top of your screen, there are 3 dots with more underneath. If you just pop down and go to chat, if you wouldn't mind putting in where you're from, it'd be great just to sort of give us an idea of where people are coming from. That'd be great. Nice. Minnesota. Bulgaria, wow. Welcome. Wendy, I'm hoping that it looks like spring is coming to Minnesota, much as it is here in just outside of Toronto, where I'm from. I was in Vermont for a few days, and there's still quite a bit of snow here, and I came back there, and I came back here, and it's all gone. So fingers crossed things are going well for you in Minnesota as well. Just going to give folks a couple more minutes to get logged on. For those of you who have just joined us, if you wouldn't mind going to the chat feature, which you can access at the top of the screen. If it's not there, obviously, you can go to more and then click on chat and just let us know where you're from. And Jose is making us feel bad by telling us it's 86 degrees there in Ocala. Thanks so much, Jose. But if you guys wouldn't mind just letting us know where you're from, that would be wonderful. I'm going to give folks 2 more minutes to get logged on here, and then we'll get underway. All right, so just another minute or so to go here. Just in case a couple of you have scooted in just here under the wire, if you wouldn't mind going to the chat feature, which you can access from the top panel on your screen, and just let us know where you're accessing this webinar from, that would be great. We're always interested in the demographics of the folks that participate. And also, just while we're waiting to get started here, if you have any questions as we pop along, feel free to type them into that chat box. I'll check every once in a while just to make sure that I haven't missed anything, but we'll try and leave some room at the end of the presentation for questions as well. It's just a little bit of a pickle for me to see the questions and do the presentation at the same time, but please feel free to put any questions there in the chat. Okay, well, it's just after 2 o'clock, so I think we'll just get rolling here. As I said at the beginning of the call, some of you might have missed, my name is Katie Ardeline. I am an HR specialist, also a partner in Oculus Canada. I have HR background, as in I went to school for human resources, but I was also the operations manager at a multi-location equine veterinary practice for about 7 or 8 years. So I have HR background and veterinary clinic background as well. So I bring those 2 things together. So today I'm really excited to talk to you guys about hiring strategies. So as we know, it's really hard to find staff and to retain staff. Today we're just going to focus on the hiring strategies. So I thought what I would do is start out with the reality of the situation right now. So just to sort of set the stage for you all, and I apologize, I don't have Bulgarian or Swiss statistics here, but here's some statistics from the USA and Canada. So in the USA, there are around 3,000 new DVM grads or new veterinarian grads each year. And in Canada, about 1/10 the size, we have about 350 DVM grads. So when you look at those statistics, about 75% of those go into private practice, so go into clinics, and then 25% go into other places, so government, industry, teaching, and research. So keeping those numbers in mind, it's really a candidates market out there, and you guys are all on this call probably because you're well aware of that. In the US, there are approximately anywhere between 28 and 32,000 vet clinics. So think about that number in the context of the around 2,250 grads that are going into clinical practice. And in Canada, we have around 3,500 vet clinics with about 263 graduates who are intending to go into private practice. So, I mean, that's a pretty a lean labor market if I ever saw one. And then think about also your RVTs, your vet assistants, your kennel staff, your customer service and reception staff, and your clinic managers. It's a really hard place right now to be able to find staff and to retain those staff. But we're just going to focus on hiring today. I think retention could be a focus of 10 other webinars, but we'll just focus on the hiring part of things today. So when we're looking at how we want to make ourselves different, I mean, we're not Google. We don't have unlimited funds for, you know, ball pits and drinks in the fridge and slides from floor to floor and all of that kind of thing. But there are still things that we can do to make ourselves unique and make ourselves attractive to potential candidates. So whereas in the past, it might have been a market where, you know, there were multiple candidates for every position, it's very much the flip side of that now, where we just don't have enough people for the positions that we want to fill. So then it becomes important for us as employers to ensure that we're doing things to make ourselves different, to make ourselves stand out of the crowd when it comes to the hiring process. So when we think about what makes us different, I mean, we all do basically the same thing. We treat animals and care for animals and their owners. So we have that, you know, sort of in mind, but we have to think about what can make us different and what can make a candidate possibly pick us instead of another veterinary practice. So here are some of the factors that go into what makes us different from the vet practice next door or down the road. So if you think about culture, you think about the work environment, you think about compensation and benefits, those are obviously huge things as well. Think about work-life balance, and we think about development opportunities. So all of these factors go into sort of the intangible type of things that would make people choose you over somebody else. And we actually call these factors the employee value proposition. So these are the factors that employees are looking at when they are evaluating all of their options. They're looking for a good fit for themselves in light of all of these factors. So what does the employee really want? The employee wants to make sure that they understand the culture that they're possibly getting into. They want to understand what a day in a life is going to be like. They want to understand what the employee experience is like. And they want to be able to find a brand to which they have a personal connection. So they want to feel some kind of connection. They want to feel like it's going to be a good fit. And this is, you know, the idea of fit is something that's so important. We'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. But, you know, I challenge you as we go through this to sort of think about what you are doing to make your brand or your clinic something special and make it something attractive for people to come to. So when we talk about culture, which is the first thing we'll talk about, what we're really talking about are the values, belief systems, attitude, and set of assumptions that people in a workplace share. So, you know, it's how we do things around here. It's whether you walk into a clinic and people are very serious or people are a little bit more relaxed. It has to do, there are a number of different factors that go into culture. So I would think when you're thinking about your culture, think about what kind of culture you're creating, either consciously or unconsciously. So your leadership style, whether you're traditional hierarchical or whether you have a flatter collaborative leadership style, those are things that are going to influence the kind of culture you have in a very profound way. The clinic-wide communication style. So are you a clinic that makes sure that everybody knows what's going on all the time? Are people sort of on a need-to-know basis? Does everybody have an email address? Does everybody understand how they're going to be communicated with? And also, what kind of communication do you seek from your employees? Do you ask for their opinions? Do you involve them in decisions that affect them? All of those types of things go into communication. We're also talking about feedback and performance management. So do we have a culture where we have a very open environment where we avoid triangulation and that we talk about issues as they come up? Are we positive about feedback? So are we looking to help people improve instead of making them feel badly for making a mistake? And are we actually doing performance management at all? So are we doing a yearly review? Are we doing monthly check-ins? Are we doing something so that the staff have a good idea of how they're doing at all times? You know, there's nothing worse than going into a review when you haven't had a review for 12 months and you're totally surprised by all of the feedback. You know, obviously, I don't think there's any environment where that really works well, but something to think about is that the performance management side of things as well. Also, the culture that you are creating also depends on the employee care. So, you know, what kind of, do people have sick days? You know, do people have vacation time? What kind of vacation time do they have? Are they met with understanding and empathy when they need to take time off for family issues or sick kids or when they're sick themselves? And then also, are you transparent? Is there information that you're sharing with employees about how the company is doing, about what goals are for the company, and about how they fit in? So those are all things that you kind of need to keep in mind when you're thinking about the culture you're creating. And the thing too to keep in mind here is we can make all sorts of plans and we can put all sorts of programs in place and tell people, you know, what our culture is. But as leaders, we have to make sure that we're actually living that culture and we're walking the talk. I mean, if you're telling employees to act one way and you act the other, that's not a great example to set. And obviously, a lot of issues start with leadership and start at the top. So I challenge you to take a critical evaluation of how you come across to your staff and are you living the type of culture that you want to create. So putting the culture together, I like to say, my pet phrase I like to say is everybody on the bus? So does everybody understand where we're going, why we're going in the direction we're going? Does everybody understand how we're doing things? Are people dedicated to the company's vision? All of those kinds of things. So if you hear me say, are people on the bus? This is what I'm talking about. Not necessarily this holiday bus with a giant nose, but any kind of bus. Are people all moving in the same direction at the same time? I'm just going to take a second here to check for questions. Give me a second. Oh, nothing yet. Okay. All right. So I just want to break down the various components of culture. So when we talk about culture, there are a number of things that go into it. But we're going to talk about the mission, purpose, and core values, as well as company vision when we talk about the components of culture. So once again, remember, we need to make sure that we're offering a unique value proposition for an employee. So we're making sure that we have a very strong culture that we can put into words so that we're a type of place where an employee wants to throw their hat in the ring and where they maybe want to work. So when we talk about the mission, we're talking about the purpose of the company and also the company's values. So mission answers the question, why are we here and what makes us unique? So, you know, I mean, like I said at the beginning, there are, you know, thousands and thousands of vet clinics, and likely you're not the only game in town at your clinic. So what are you doing to make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd? And not just with employees, but also with clients and patients. So here's an example of a mission. This is from McKee Panel Equine Services here in Southern Ontario near Toronto. So the mission is we give horse people peace of mind with their horse health care by helping them make informed decisions. So the mission should tell people, you know, what are we doing that's unique? And I mean, the unique part here is, you know, veterinarians aren't always interested in making sure that their clients are involved in their pet's care. So, you know, this is a clinic who really values the customer experience and really values making sure that clients are heard and that their concerns are all taken care of. So that's the mission. And the company core values, to me, are kind of the most important baseline thing that any company should have. I mean, even if you don't have a mission, you don't have a vision, you need to have core values. You need to be able to vocalize the fundamental beliefs upon which your company's business and behavior are based. The core values are guiding principles for what we do internally and also how we treat clients. And really, they're a filter through which decisions are evaluated. They can also help us determine, or, you know, if somebody said to you, what's it like to work here? The core values could help illustrate and inform as far as that question goes. So for example, this is Gusto. This is a company that makes HR software and employee onboarding software and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to read them one by one. You can all read, but this gives you an idea. So ownership mentality. Every employee has the power to make our company better. So that gives you an idea. You know, they want employee input and they might have a flatter organizational structure than somewhere else. Don't optimize for the short term. So obviously they're thinking into the future. They probably have a pretty strong vision and they know where they're going. So go the extra mile, go beyond delivering what works, discover what delights. So really, to me, I would say this is a company that really asks their clients what they want and put together things that people might not expect, but that really make them happy. And then do what's right. So what is right isn't the same as what is easy. So it gives you an idea of how they make decisions and the types of decisions that they make. And then I love this one, and I mentioned transparency before. So be transparent, share information, share mistakes, and share victories. So it seems like this is a company that has very open communication. And, you know, this doesn't have to be everybody's core values, but I really like how they've really spelled it out, and it really gives you a good picture of what it's like to work at your company, or at their company, I should say. All right. So when we're also, like I mentioned, one of the other components of culture is the company's vision. So the vision is really, where do we want to go? I don't know if any of you are familiar with BHAG or BHAG, but it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. So this is a goal that, I mean, you know, it could be something as crazy as, you know, I'm going to build a rocket ship and go to the moon. You know, that could be like a SpaceX type of BHAG. It should be aspirational, but it also should be attainable. So again, this is an example from McKee Panel Equine Services. We want to become a global equine veterinary business recognized for leadership and innovation in patient, client, and employee care. So this is a guiding light for this company. You know, all the decisions that they make, they're thinking, is this actually supporting our vision? Are these decisions supporting where we actually want to go? So once again, looking at the employee value proposition. So we've talked about culture. Now other things that we can do to help us stand out from the crowd. We're going to talk about compensation, benefits, work-life balance, and work environment next. So compensation. I'm not sure how many of you have pay scales, so you know sort of what your entry wage is for a job all the way up to the top wage. And where your people are on it. You should really have pay scales so that you are able to make sure that you're paying people, you know, in a fair way internally. You also want to make sure that you're paying competitively. So, you know, in the market, we work with a lot of folks all over the world, and it's kind of surprising to me how many people aren't really sure what the market pays. And there are sources all over the place. These are North American sources, and I apologize to our European participants, but the Ontario Association of Veterinary Techs, the OVMA, the VHMA, the AEP, they all have pay statistics that you can find. You can also Google it. I mean, you're not going to get as rigorous a set of data as you would if you went right to the sources, but this will give you an idea of what people pay. And it's also always a good idea to look outside of the veterinary industry as well. So what are comparable positions in, say, in human medicine paying? You know, what are personal care assistants making, and how does that relate to what your veterinary assistants might be making? So think outside the box when you're doing salary type surveys, and don't just sort of don't work in a vacuum where you're just working on what you've always paid people. You really need to make sure that you're paying competitively for the market. I mean, as much as people, you know, say it's not all about the money, when people are coming out of veterinary school or any other kind of school with giant debt, it's very much about the money. So you need to make sure that you're preparing to pay people in a competitive way. So the next factor is benefits and work-life balance. So these are pretty obvious, at least on the benefit side, depending on the country you're in and what's kind of customary. You know, are you offering health and dental and travel medical insurance? You know, some companies, I've seen some companies where they just have like a yearly bank, so to speak. You might have $1,000 or 2,000 euros or whatever the case may be to spend on all of the benefits. But I really encourage you, if you don't do this, to look into employee benefit packages and see, is there something that we can offer employees that we can actually afford? We can talk to employees and say, is this something you would use, and would you be willing to share the cost? I know in the United States, it's much more expensive than in Canada, but you know, these are all things that people look at. Also time off. So are you offering vacation, and how much are you offering? You know, in Canada, vacation is mandated, but it's not in the US. Are you offering sick days or other personal days? Are you offering volunteer days? You know, how flexible are you with that time off? Are you offering staff discounts? I think this is pretty standard, but also something to think about in the context of everybody else that you're competing with for employees. You know, do you have a flexible schedule? Do you offer a 4-day work week? You know, we talk about work-life balance, and it's not necessarily the same thing for each person. So for somebody, it might be at one stage in their life, it might be a 4-day work week, but then they have kids, and in the next stage of their life, work-life balance might be starting earlier and ending earlier, or whatever the case may be. So are you willing to be flexible with people? And it can be very difficult in the veterinary world. I mean, you know, you have to have veterinarians on, you need to have support staff on. But I challenge you to be flexible and think about how you can think outside the box and you can accommodate people. Do you actually know what your staff value? So maybe you're offering health and dental insurance, but you know, you are paying very, very low as far as an hourly wage or a veterinary salary is going. You know, in that case, the staff isn't going to value the benefits, the health and dental benefits. So you need to ask them, you know, are you guys using this? Do you like this? Could we use the money somewhere else? And not all staff value the same thing. So again, it's really important to make sure you're not making assumptions and that you're asking questions. So again, what makes you different? Your work environment. What's your facility like? I know not everybody has like a beautiful purpose-built facility for either equine, mixed animal, or small animal, but what's your facility like? How is it the upkeep on the facility? I mean, is it kept clean? Is it older, but it's kept clean? Or, you know, what's the first impression like when people walk into your facility? Are people working together in a big area, or are they segregated into smaller areas? Is it okay to laugh in your work environment? I mean, there are some places where, you know, it's sort of a more serious environment, and somebody with a sense of humor might not be comfortable there because it's not something that's, you know, laughing isn't necessarily something that's okay. Might be a bit of a ridiculous example, but I've seen a lot of things. Is it an employee lounge or a lunchroom? You know, what kind of facilities are there for employees? Is there a separate employee bathroom? All those considerations. And then what kind of employee activities do you do? So do you have parties? Do you do family days? Do you have theme days? Is there food around? You know, these are all things that you need to consider. And some stuff, I mean, there are some hospitals, there's not much we can do about the space that we're given. We can't expand. We're not in a position to expand, whatever the case may be. But, you know, maybe ask the staff, do you think that we could be doing things differently here? Could we be using the space differently? So those are all things to consider. Right. So moving on to the last aspect of that employee value proposition is, or are, the development opportunities. So I challenge you to think beyond traditional continuing education. I know a lot of the time, not necessarily for DVMs, but for support staff, we kind of say, okay, well, I need, you know, 10 hours a year for my certification, so I'm just going to go to whatever. I would challenge you to challenge your staff to be a bit more picky about what it is they're going to get out of the CE that they're going to. And also look outside the veterinary world. You know, are there other courses that could benefit people at your practice that aren't from a veterinary focused provider? You know, a lot of soft skills courses. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Dale Carnegie course, but that's a course that really helps with self-awareness and helps people grow as individuals. That would be something that would be outside the veterinary world. I mean, there's a huge range of opportunities out there. And I find that we generally, we focus on DVM development opportunities, but if you want folks to stay at your practice, you're going to need to try and open those opportunities up and help the support staff find those other opportunities. Thinking about being SMART goal focused, and SMART goals could be its own presentation as well, but do you have goals? Do you require your staff to set goals, and are you following up on those goals? Thinking about hard and soft skills. So, you know, yes, it's important to be able to inject a fetlock on a horse, but it's also important to be able to receive feedback, to give and receive feedback. So it's not necessarily just about hard skills where you can say, I invested X amount in an animal chiropractic course and it's going to pay for itself in Y amount of time. Think about the soft skills, which are traditionally harder to see a financial return on, but as far as people being happier at work, people being able to talk to people more effectively, so maybe be able to sell services more easily, and to be able to give and receive that feedback, those soft skills are so important. Also, is there anywhere to move up at the practice? So a lot of veterinary practices are quite small, and beyond, you know, the owners and maybe an office manager or a practice manager, it can be difficult for people to see where they have a future. And this is particularly the case for non-veterinary staff, which are traditionally lower paying positions. You know, have you thought about creating positions? Or another way to look at it is, are there special projects that need to be completed that this person could do once they're sort of on top of their job duties? Can they put together training manuals? Can they make videos with protocols? You know, what other ways can you encourage them to be engaged and to develop themselves that aren't necessarily what we think of traditionally? So as far as the employee value proposition goes, just some points to ponder. Thinking about why someone should choose you over another practice. I think when you're sort of thinking, well, how do I attract people? Like there's so few candidates and so many openings. You need to make yourself stand out. So why would someone choose you over another practice? Or why would they choose another practice over you? That's something to think about as well. And maybe that's the more productive way to look at it. Can you and your staff accurately describe your company's culture and your brand? You know, if somebody said, what's it like to work at your practice? Can you say it? What would your employees say? Do you know where you're going and how you're going to get there? So thinking back about the mission and vision, you know, are you sort of just going aimlessly and working to make sure people get paid? Or, you know, what do you want to do in a year? How do you want to expand in 5 years? Do you want a new facility? What is it that you want and how are you going to get there? And also, before we kind of move into the more, you know, hands-on hiring side of things, do you make desperation hires? And desperation hires are when you just need a body, so you hire the first body that comes along. You know, and it can be very tempting when we are really desperate for people, support staff in particular. So this person can answer the phone, perfect, I'm gonna put them on reception. And then you find out a couple of months later that they're a very terrible fit, and you've gone through all the trouble of hiring them and onboarding them and getting them trained, and you're like, ooh, this is not a good fit after all. And it's not fair to that person, but it's also not fair to your clients and also the staff at your practice when you have a mismatch like that. So it's really important to be really selective when you're hiring. As much as there aren't a lot of candidates out there, if you do your homework and you make yourself a place where people want to come work, then you have a bit more flexibility when the candidates come across your desk. So moving on to, you know what, I'm going to check for questions first. Let's see. No questions. All right. So we're going to move on to actual hiring processes. I think. Yes. So when we're thinking about ways to hire folks and ways to hire people who are going to be a better fit for your practice, we also, obviously, you know, once we have things sorted out, we have the culture sorted out, you know, it took like an hour or two to get everything figured out. Then how do we find the right people? How do we find the people who are actually going to fit in? And hard skills and soft skills are really, really important. So yes, the vet can spay a cat, but can they get along well with the techs that you have employed? So it's not just about hard skills. The hard skills are more of the commodity. The soft skills are something that are a little harder to find and sometimes harder to define, and to be able to winnow out those skills from your candidates can be really difficult. Something else to think about in that tight hiring market, you know, it takes a while to hire people. You know, you might be waiting for references, or you might be waiting for them to come in for an interview with certain key people who aren't available at the time, or whatever the case may be. It's really important to make sure that you're communicating, that you're keeping in touch with that employee, or that potential employee, I should say, so that you're not at risk of losing them to someone else. And, you know, it can take a couple of months to hire somebody, you know, in a manager type position, and that's fine. You want to do your due diligence, but make sure that you're keeping them informed. And make sure that they understand where they are in the process at all times. Something also to think about is that your candidates are watching you. So hopefully not in like a binoculars in a darkened car type of way, but they're going to be researching you and your brand online. You know, something to think about, you know, a lot of folks live in fear of a negative Google review. And I mean, we're all going to get Google reviews, and it just happens. You know, we don't always see eye to eye with a client, or we're not providing them what they needed, or we made a mistake, or whatever the case may be. And, you know, you obviously can't suppress those negative reviews, but how you respond to those negative reviews in a public way is pretty telling, and people are paying attention to that. So, you know, don't just think about the positive reviews, think about how you respond respectfully to those negative reviews. If you use social media, you can use social media to highlight the aspects of the EVP and the things that make you unique. So you can have, you know, you can post photos of somebody at continuing education. If you had a Valentine's Day party, you can post photos of that. Photos from the, you know, early on in the Christmas party. If you have a kids day, if you do outreach with 4-H or, you know, a community group, you can post all of those things. And obviously those are things that are going to make clients feel good about using you, but they're also things that candidates are going to see when they're researching you, when they're trying to figure out if you're a good match for them. Also, something to consider are current and former employees and the feedback that they may have. So, I mean, everybody doesn't work everywhere in one place for their whole life. You're going to have former employees. And whether they left on, you know, good terms, whether it was their choice or whether it wasn't their choice, they're going to remember how they felt when they left. And there's a definite possibility, particularly in smaller world, like the horse world, where everybody knows everybody, people are going to find out how you treat people. So, you know, it's very important to make sure that that you are setting a good impression and that you understand how people are going to react if they're asked these kinds of questions. Okay, so moving on to the good stuff. So job postings. Obviously, job postings are a chance to showcase your personality. So I look at a lot of job postings online, and a lot of the time people cut and paste the job description into a job posting, and that's pretty much it. That's not really an effective way for somebody to really understand what you are about. I mean, if people see an ad for a registered veterinary technician or a nurse for our European friends, they're going to understand basically what the job entails in broad strokes anyway, but they want to know about you and about the company and about the type of person that they are looking for. So make sure that you describe the ideal candidate in your job ad. Make sure you describe all that you have to offer, and not just, we have a therapeutic laser and we have 4, digital x-ray machines and we've got a new dental unit and all of that stuff. That stuff's nice, but it's not telling them really anything about the practice other than, you have money to spend or you finance a lot of equipment. So you need to tell them, what, again, going back to the EVP, what makes you unique? What makes you different? Are you going to have a potential match as far as culture goes? Make sure that you have compensation and benefits information in there. If you don't want to list specific compensation, then still have a line about, compensation commensurate with experience, and make sure you list all of the benefits that you offer, or at least the main benefits that you offer. People are going to want to know that. And another fun place where, it's good practice as far as communication goes, but it also helps you weed out people who aren't good at following instructions, is to make sure that you leave a space for or tell them that how to contact you and next steps. I always like to ask for a covering letter that outlines, how they think they're going to be a good fit. And I think that it really helps you, if they don't send you a cover letter that tells you something, it's an easy way to weed people out, but also you can get a basic idea of their personality and how they interact and how they feel about their skill set. I think I saw a question come up here. Just give me a second. Psychological tests. Great question. So psychological testing, there are some, for me, really the only ones that I would do are ones that measure emotional intelligence, which I think is kind of the most important indicator of whether somebody's going to be successful or not. The pickle is that a lot of the stuff that you find online is sort of an informational type thing rather than something that you can take action on. So I think there are certainly certain tests that if you're willing to pay for them, that I think can be very useful, but it can be difficult. I'd almost want my whole staff to fill them out so I can get an idea of baselines and the context of the bigger group. There are always questions as far as the rigor goes of those psychological tests. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's not something that I necessarily do because as we'll talk about in a little while, have other ways of evaluating emotional intelligence. But by all means, if it's something you think that would be helpful, I would go into it. I just caution doing research on the types of tests that are out there and make sure that they're worth your while. Okay, so moving back to job postings. So as far as where to post jobs, I have to say I've had better luck using Indeed, which people might be groaning right now because you get 100 resumes and 10 of them are good, but it does cast a really wide net, more so for non-DVM positions, for your support staff positions. Facebook can be another really good place. I think I've probably had the most success through Facebook and Indeed. Also posting it with associations like the OBMA, the VHMA, the AUP, et cetera, et cetera. Usually you have to pay for those postings, and to be perfectly honest, I haven't seen a lot of payback as far as those listings go, but it's important to get them up there. It's not like it's an onerous amount to pay, but you do have to pay for them. LinkedIn is another good one. If you have a big network on LinkedIn, and I have to admit, I'm not great at being on LinkedIn, But if you are on there and you have a big network, it's definitely worth posting on there as well, because it's all about connections and who knows who. Those are just some ideas. And I do want to also say that what I'm talking about here are, going after active candidates. So we're in this presentation, I'm talking about going after people who are actively looking for work, whether they're new grads or they're looking to switch companies or whatever the case may be. It can be difficult, and you can also think about hiring a placement firm or a headhunter, basically, and they'll go after the passive clients. So the passive candidates, so they're pretty shamed. They don't have much shame, so they'll call folks up and say, hey, we have this opportunity, are you looking for something? So that's, if you are in a really, really tight market and you're looking for somebody very specialized, or you just really don't have time, then it can be a really great option. It just can be very, very expensive to go with a headhunter type agency. Usually they take a percentage of the first year wages of that person. It can be anywhere between 20 and 30%. But it can be good because they can give you a bit of a guarantee where if the person doesn't work out in the first 6 months, then they have some kind of compensation worked out, or they'll help you find somebody else or whatever. So just something to think about. I'm not a headhunter personally. I like hiring, but I'm not the type to go cold calling people to see if they're looking for work. But thankfully there are people who will do that for you. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so this is a pretty fun quote. So this guy, Sean Sparling, has, I believe it's an agricultural consulting business. And yeah, so, it's all about impressions, and it's about how you look and how the employee perceives. It really goes both ways, but I just like to throw that up there. Something else to think about, and I mentioned it a couple times before, skills are a commodity. So, if somebody is a veterinarian, they've been to vet school, they've done an internship, they're going to have a certain a set of skills that you're pretty confident about. And just because they have those skills, it doesn't mean that they're going to be a good fit, which is what we've been talking about at the beginning of the presentation as well. So we like to say hire the smile and train the skill, maybe more so for your non-nurse or RVT and non-DVM staff. But so, for a receptionist, we can train them to be a receptionist. We can train somebody to be a veterinary assistant. But we want to make sure that they're going to be a really good fit, and that they're going to be somebody who is a positive contribution to our culture and isn't a negative. So that's just something to think about. Hire the smile, train the skill. So I'm going to talk about just some ways that you can really drill down and try and make sure that you are plucking out the best candidates for you and the best customized candidates for you. So when we, let's say that we've put together our job posting and we listed it and we've got 10 candidates that we really like, make sure you're going through the resumes, making sure that you're looking to make sure that they actually have the requirements that you're looking for. The flip side of having a cover letter is, people could be not truthful in their cover letter. And if you go to the resume and they don't seem to match up, you can ask yourself some questions there. But once you have that initial, group of however many people it is, I always counsel people to make sure that they're conducting a pre-screening phone call type interview. So this isn't a full interview, not like a full court press of, every single question that you're going to ask. This is a really good way for you to save some time and also be able to quickly evaluate whether this person is going to be a good culture fit or not. Something else you can consider is using video conferencing for this. So for people who have better internet than I do, video conferencing can be a really good way to look at that person face to face and kind of put them a little bit of pressure on them to see how they react in that environment. Video conferencing isn't necessarily comfortable for most of the population, so that can be something to consider. So in the phone interview, really you're just really making sure that they can confirm the skills that they have on the resume. I would ask them basic questions like, why are you looking for another job? What are your salary and benefits expectations? Just so at the beginning you can see if you have a huge mismatch. and just see really overall how they communicate. You know, have them tell them this is really informal and that you just want to get to know to see if this is a good fit. You know, there are a lot of things that you can evaluate in that initial pre-screening interview. You just have to make sure that you don't let it go on and last all of a sudden 2 hours have gone by, because really you want to be face-to-face for that kind of time with somebody. But, you know, 15 to 30 minutes, have a set of questions that you're going to ask. And then also note your red flags or your deal breakers up front. You know, if you're like, this person seems to have a lot of experience, but it sounds like maybe they're not a great teammate. And that's something that you can think about, you know, in the context of your other applicants. And when you bring this person in for an actual interview, you can kind of dig a little bit deeper. Ooh. So as far as the in-person interview goes, for sure it needs to be face-to-face, whether that's human face-to-face or video face-to-face. You need to be prepared. So out of respect to the candidate, have a schedule. Make sure that you actually know your own job requirements, and make sure that you know the candidate's resume as well. So be prepared. Ask what they know about the company. You know, this is sort of something you might be a bit of an eye roller, or, you know, think, well, of course they've looked into the company, but they don't. So some of them, you know, they might say, you know, I say, well, what do you know about this practice? And they say, well, I know that you're a horse veterinarian. Like, well, it's not quite enough. Let's see what else they have. Sorry, I have to mute for a moment here. I'm back, I apologize. So you need to see if they know, like, are they actually interested? You know, did they research about the company? A lot of folks that are very, very enthusiastic, you'll be pretty blown away by the specific things that they can pick up about the company. And you can see what kind of research they've done. So again, in that in-person interview, you want to go through their experience again and ask about any gaps or follow up on any red flags that you had in the phone screening interview. And of course, ask if they have any questions. They should do a lot of talking. So you want to make sure that you give them a chance to do that. And then obviously, the hard skills, you're going to want to make sure you have an updated job description. So make sure that you can tell the person exactly what's entailed in the job, and ask specific questions about their experience. This is a bit of a tricky one, because it's hard to, you know, there are questions that you can ask a veterinarian where you can tell whether they know what they're doing or not. But you might like things done a certain way. So anyway, there are certain questions that you can ask about those hard skills, but I wouldn't necessarily focus on those in this in-person interview. The best part for me, my favorite part of any interview process, is asking behavioral and situational questions. And if you're not doing this and you take one thing home from this presentation, I would say it's to think about developing these types of questions. So the behavioral questions are tell me about a time when questions. So they're the past behavior is the greatest predictor of future behavior type questions. So, you know, ask them about a time when they X, Y, Z. Situational, what would you do if? So the nice thing about having both behavioral and situational questions is behavioral, they can game the system to some extent. I mean, they could lie to you. If they really wanted to in a behavioral question, they could just make something up. Whereas if you pose a situational question to them, it's a little hard for them to squirm out of that one. Something to think about also is tailoring the questions to your core values. So if you're looking for a certain type of person and you're making sure that you have a good culture fit for the benefit of both of you, then I would ask you to consider tailoring those questions to your core values. And in the next couple slides, I'll show you what I mean. Something else also is to make sure you're asking the same questions of all the candidates. So if you have your plan and you know the questions you want to ask, you want to be able to compare candidates to each other. And if you're asking them the same questions, then it's an easy way to sort of figure out who answered it best. And you could even rate their answer on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 or whatever the case may be. Just something else to consider. So when we look at a behavioral example of a question, so if our core value is emotional intelligence and self-awareness, an example might be, have you ever had to work with someone with whom you didn't like or just couldn't get along with? And how did you cope with the situation? So that would assess, you know, how well they can get along with various groups. And there's another example here for accountability. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake in the workplace How did you deal with it? And what steps did you take to ensure that it didn't happen again? And I have to be perfectly honest, if you go online and you look up like core value-based interview questions, you'll get a huge, like, pages and pages of these. So really, I'm saying you have no excuse. You can go through the wilds of the internet and you can find these for yourself if you don't want to make them up on your own. So situational example, if our core value is integrity and honesty, so this is posing a hypothetical situation and seeing how they'd react. So what would you do if a client asked you to change their horse's medical records before sending them to the insurance company? So that's a pretty good way to evaluate integrity and honesty. And then another one might be team focus, if that was your core value. What would you do if you saw one of your colleagues was struggling with their workload? So that would be, you know, another way to get that information and see how that person would react. And then fun questions, my absolute like cherry on the sundae of questions is asking people curveball questions. And this is really to evaluate their emotional intelligence and their adaptability. So here are some examples. So who inspires you and why? And I'll guarantee that 95% of the people say their mom, and they always have a really touching story. So yeah, I would always ask that one. This is an interesting one too, and this is a self-awareness one. What would your friends or family say is the biggest misperception someone might have about you when they first meet you? So that's an interesting one to ask. Ask them what book they're reading, or, you know, if they're into something on Netflix, ask them about that. If you could visit anywhere in the world, where would it be? What has been your biggest disappointment or regret in life, ... So there's lots of these questions. Again, go online, you can find them, but this really helps you get the candidate to think outside of the interview box. I mean, they're probably ready for some kind of a curveball question, but there's just so many opportunities, or so many different configurations of them out there that you'll find something good. I would say the friends or family and the misperception one is a really, really good one to ask. It really makes them think about themselves and how they appear to other people. All right, so, you know, we've got to a point where we have a candidate and we're really excited about them, and we want to make sure that they didn't make up a whole personality and, you know, they're who they say they are. You need to be able to call their references. And it can be difficult because a lot of quote unquote HR departments don't give out references. Though I have to say I've had pretty good luck getting some really good information from people. So the references, I like to do them after I've done the actual interviews because then you have a really good idea of the person, and you can tailor your reference questions to people, to the actual candidate. For example, I was doing some interviewing for a manager for an Oculus client, and I was like, this person has excellent experience, but it seems like maybe they're not great with people. It seems like they're a bit impatient with people who don't do what they say or don't do it quickly enough. So when I was able to talk to the references, I asked them point blank, you know, what do you think about this question? Did you see that they had any problems with staff? And I got information that really helped me help lower that red flag. So I would really make sure that you for sure do the references. Look for consistency in the feedback. So obviously you want to see if this person is who they say they are, and that everybody who's worked with this person had a consistent experience. And don't be afraid to creep a candidate's social media either. I mean, if they've left it there public, or if there's anything you can see, I mean, I wouldn't go like private investigator, you know, sunglasses and a trench coat or anything like that, but go on their social media and see what they're up to. You never know. There's some pretty interesting gems that you can find on social media. All right, so the working interview, you really need to have a working interview. You know, you might, as an owner or as a manager, you might love a candidate and you hire them, and then on the first day, the staff are like, why did you hire this person? So the working interview is really, really important, both to see how they actually can do the job and sort of what their general knowledge is, but also do they actually get along with your team? So you need to plan this day out and make sure that you have the candidates spend time with as many individuals or groups as possible. They can't just hang out with you all day. You know, if it's practical, put some of their basic skills to the test. You know, have somebody who's interviewing for a receptionist position, have them, make some calls to confirm appointments. If you're hiring somebody to be a vet assistant, have them lunge a horse. Put some of those basics to the test. And really, when it comes down to it, if the employees really give somebody a universal thumbs down and you really like them, you have to listen to your staff. And the reverse is true also. If you aren't so sure about a candidate and they go in with the staff and the staff are like, this person's awesome, then you need to be able to respect that opinion as well. And just quickly on offers and onboarding. So to make yourself start on the best, put your best foot forward. Make sure that you're putting together an actual contract or other methods of the offer. I know in the US at will states, you don't really put together a contract, but think about the term sheet that you're putting together and make sure that it goes along with the employee handbook so the person knows right away what the expectations are. Make sure that you inform your current staff about the successful candidate, what the start date is and what the plan is. Don't just spring a new person on people. They don't like that very much. Make sure everybody knows. You need to have a plan. So you need to put together, what are we going to do with this person in the first day, in the first week, in the first month? Are we going to put them with a mentor that'll help them with their training? All of those types of things need to be planned out in advance. Have everything set up in advance. So have their desk set up. Make sure if you have them have their bits of uniform ready. Help them make sure they have a name tag, make sure they have an email address set up, and send out an email or whatever your means of communication is on the first day that they're there to say, here's this person, here's a picture of them, here's how you can contact them, and this is what they're going to be doing, just so everybody knows. And obviously ensure your mission, vision, and core values are front and center right from the beginning of the employment of this person. So they need to understand and they need to have that all reinforced right from the beginning. So retaining staff is a whole other thing, which will probably be the subject of a future webinar. But if you've done everything that you can do to make yourself or make your practice a place where people want to come to work and where people are happy, you have a much better chance of landing those candidates in that tight labor market. So yes, that is what I have for today, and we're at 2:54, and I saw a couple of questions come up here. So let me see. What's the definition for emotional intelligence? That is a great question. So emotional intelligence is the degree to which we understand or the degree to which we are able to verbalize or see the effect that our emotions have on other people. And, it's having empathy. So it's, understanding that not everybody has the same background as we do, and understanding that various viewpoints that are different than our own are a good thing. It's basically, emotional intelligence is the degree to which we take responsibility for what we do and how we affect other people. You have people who seem to say all the time, why does this always happen to me? And you want to say to them, because you need to hold a mirror up to yourself. Those are people who maybe don't have the best emotional intelligence. I mean, people have bad luck, but if they're in the same situation, the same thing happens to them, they're likely not able to really look within and see what part they have to play in a situation. So I hope that answers your question. Are there any other questions that folks have before we sign off? Just going to chat here. Show the slide about the core values again. Absolutely. Let's go back. And we will actually, we're recording this, and we will send this out to all of you so that you have a copy of it. And so I hope that you haven't been taking notes. I should have said that at the beginning. But we'll send a copy of this out with a recording of my lovely voice so you can listen to it, as something to help you go to sleep at night or whatever the case may be. But we also are hoping that we'll be able to announce the subject of our next webinar in the next couple of weeks. But with that in mind, it'd be great if you guys could contact us with any ideas that you have on subjects that you'd like to hear about. I mean, I'm huge in all the HR stuff, so to me, it's all really exciting. But a couple of weeks ago, or about a month ago, Dr. Pownell did a topic on, whether to sell or retain your practice in the environment of corporate buying groups and things like that. Really open to talk about anything. So if you have anything that you want to hear about, just let us know. I think that's about it. And with that in mind, I will sign off. I really appreciate all of your time today, and for letting me know where you're from and helping me be jealous about places where it's 86 degrees Fahrenheit already. Other than that, have a wonderful afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much. Goodbye.